What is up, everybody? My name is Richard Terrell. I go by Kirby Kid, and you are watching the Mario Maker weekly recap for our Mario Maker workshop. This is a workshop in which we learn level design and we learn about game design by using Mario Maker 2 as our platform of choice. So we've been 15 weeks into this very long and interesting and experimental this workshop, this curriculum here, and we are pretty much at the final lessons for the whole course. So we started off with a lot of basics. We started off with just basic blocks and enemies and coins and secrets, and from there we talked about difficulty with skill and knowledge and dexterity, adaptation, reflex, timing, and now we're on to some really much more complex stuff that's going to take a lot longer to explain, and it requires a solid foundation of understanding of everything that we covered thus far. But if you're new to the stream, or you're new to the Mario Maker workshop, or you want a refresher, or you're just very curious, the only place you have to go to catch up is... Whoa, where's my website? Right here. The only place you have to go is designoriented.net, and we have all the lessons here for you to catch up on. This is lesson 5 where we talked about power-ups, but you can just go straight to our main website here. Boop. And scroll down until you see something yellow. That's the Mario Maker workshop. Here you'll find an explanation for what we are, who we are, and what we look like. And you can go to the lesson hub right here and catch up on all the concepts, all the levels that we created, and all the lessons that we learned in these last 15 weeks or so. So what's cool is, you better load. What's cool is now we're going to cover some of the most advanced concepts of the course up until this point. And I've been talking about some of these concepts since around like 2009, right? About 10 years. I've been looking to Mario's level design and trying to find the language to understand what it does well and why it works so well and why other games can't quite pull it off and do it. So it's time to explain it, right? Here are the lessons so far, if you kind of want to take a gander at that. So it's even interesting, even in interviews with game studios, right? One of the my little go-to topics is saying that I spent a lot of research explaining what makes Mario level design so good. And the follow-up question is always, well, what makes Mario level design so good? And my follow-up answer is always, how much time do you have? Because honestly, I could explain this stuff and it could take a long time, or I can give you the short and quick that you want to understand. But essentially, Mario's level design and level design in general, as I've said for a long time, has more to do with, you know, the structure and the design of classical music than it does narratives, right? A lot of people compare level design to narratives and like, oh, we gotta tell a story, we gotta do start to finish, we gotta do all this stuff. But actually, gameplay in itself, the actions of it, are a little bit more abstract than that. And I think level design or music is a much better analog to understanding and even developing a language for talking about it. So with that in mind, Mario does this style of level design the best, and we're going to kind of take a deep dive into what exactly is counterpoint and how we can build up this concept based on everything we've learned so far. So everything we do in the Mario Maker workshop comes out of this spreadsheet here, and oh, Mario, okay, I can unmute you if you need to talk. Spreadsheet here, and as you can see, we have a 21-point criteria for evaluating every single one of the levels that we put in the workshop for us to critique and give feedback on. We so far have put in 212 levels, and we filled out 3,400 different cells, individual cells of feedback about all these specific topics. They're color-coded for your amusement. But as you can see here, one of the last topics is counterpoint, and I write here, which you can't see very well until I do this. In music, counterpoint describes compositions that feature multiple melody lines. Each melody line is pleasing and interesting to listen to solo, yet complementary when played at the same time. All this complexity can be achieved using fewer notes, less dense than a regular composition. Achieving such depth with such low complexity allows first-time listeners to follow along and enjoy the music, while experienced listeners find seemingly endless interesting connections between the lines, quote unquote. Examples include one part of a melody can enhance or point to another part of a different melody Melodies can move in different directions or line up with each other rhythmically, or a melody can back out entirely to highlight the other. Those are just simple little examples. Conceptually, it's easy to read on the screen, but listening, hearing that with your ears, or even understanding what this means for the structure of gameplay and level design is exactly what this stream is for. So, you know, if you ever need a refresher, it's just right up there at the top for our workshop members. Here is our rough outline for this stream. So we're gonna launch off from gameplay ideas. We recently talked about gameplay ideas. One of our workshop members, Jeff, has been deep diving into gameplay ideas and writing blog posts about it and making Mario levels to help himself learn exactly what the confines and the bounds of gameplay ideas are. So we're gonna start with that, and then we're gonna move on to talking about metaphors and puns and portmanteaus, double entendres, triple entendres, counterpoint, and critical gaming, and all these other examples to try to bring it home, right? This is Nicole time. Okay. So, you know, with me on the chat, I got my brother, I got Bleach on the mute mic, and I got even Zara decided to pop in. So if you guys have questions, you can either, I mean, you got to get my attention one way or the other. Otherwise, speak up, and we'll just take it as it goes. But... You got... Say that again, Bleach. I'm going to see the audio's coming in.
You got it.
Okay, that's loud. I'm going to lower that. I'm going to up me. I'm going to lean into my mic a little bit better. There we go. Okay. So, speaking of gameplay ideas, check out our gameplay ideas tab here. This, which I will go back to 150, is where we store all of our gameplay ideas as a workshop. Starting on the first day when Local Tony put in his room-to-room item carry idea back in 7.4 to just yesterday, or today, I had one called Fish Fry. These are small ideas for little nuggets of interactive elements in a level to grand ideas for shaping and defining the entire level's gimmick and interest and design. So it can be big or small, but they all go in here. Fish Fry is what I just came up with. It's so neat. Maybe I can show you an example. Maybe I can't. But Fish Fry, you use an item go round or a sushi go round, which is another gameplay idea in here, of Cheep Cheep. To get across gaps, players have to jump on these Cheep Cheeps that are on a track and, you know, going around in a circle. When players jump on the Cheep Cheep, they fall into the lava and become additional dynamic hazards, because when Cheep Cheep fall into the lava, they get set on fire and then they continue to jump around and be annoying. This may be great for playered level design. So basically, you're dropping the fish into the fryer, and then they're like popping around like crazy. I just thought this. I call it a fish fry. Fun. Yeah. Lots of ideas here. Each of these convey a concept, right? The ideas in here, like a thick wall of springs stacked on top of each other. Jump into the fray and kick some of the springs out to progress. This is called a wall of springs. If you ever saw this in a level where there's a giant wall of springs, you'd be like, that's a wall of springs, right? Oftentimes, a handy way that we have here to identify what gameplay ideas are is your ability to sort of wrap an interesting descriptor or a name around it. And I think the reason we can do that is pretty important property of what, you know, good gameplay ideas are. But on the grand scale of things, a gameplay idea can be extremely simple. There's a hole, you jump over it, right? Mario has plenty of these scenarios. Mario level 1-1 features a hole or a pit, and Mario has to jump over it. That's a gameplay idea. But ideas like that, simple inputs, simple challenges, are one, simple, and two, because of that, they tend to not be too interesting and notable, right? So when we're talking about gameplay ideas, we're usually talking about something that's a little bit more complex, but keep in mind that it includes all these things and everything applies across the spectrum. It's just that the more complex ones are going to be more interesting and probably have more connections to other things. So yeah, jumping over a pit is a gameplay idea. Stomping a Goomba is a gameplay idea. All the basic stuff, but then it gets more and more complicated from there. So yeah, there was some confusion, I think, about gameplay ideas where you're like, well, what counts and what doesn't count? So it's jumping over 2 Goomba, a different gameplay idea than jumping over 1. It is, but you know, insignificantly so in most contexts, right? You have to do a lot of interesting work in order to make the fact that there's 2 Goomba that you're jumping over versus 1 significant in some kind of way, right? So keep that in mind as we continue to talk here. I wish I had Jeff's blog posts. Anybody have Jeff's blog posts handy? Let's see. Where did he post that? In design? In design from NFT Jeff. Well, if anybody can find Jeff's blog post, it was about gameplay ideas, and he posted it the other day. Because he's starting a new blog. Where is it? Jeff. Yeah, one of the elements of a gameplay idea that Jeff kind of identified through his own sort of hands-on exploration of what they are through the Mario Maker workshop is he realized that gameplay ideas, the good ones, the ones that we kind of want to talk about and focus on, have a certain quality of being able to be transferable, right? So if the gameplay idea is Mario walks forward 2 pixels and jumps and then presses forward for 3 frames and then goes down, you're like, that's not a gameplay challenge, that's just describing Mario's movement. And 2, that's so specific to Mario. Like, the sentence started off with Mario, right? Like, then you have to be Mario to do it, and it's just really describing something very obvious and simple on the screen. But when we talk about gameplay ideas, we want them to be a little bit more transferable and applicable to other games, even other mediums, movies and things, right? Like, check this one out. Time loop, right? Use doors to let the player reset the world. Some things reset, some things don't. It's a time loop. How many TV shows have you seen with a time loop? Plenty, right? From Supernatural with their funny Groundhog's Day episodes to other episodes and other shows. And if you guys can remember some, just throw them out there. But essentially, you've seen time loops and you've seen what characters do about it in movies, Doctor Strange, TV shows, Supernatural, video games, Braid or whatever, and now you can take this concept of a time loop and apply it to Mario Maker. That's why, you know, in the context of a game, this is a really interesting sort of flexible gameplay idea, because you can do a lot with this even in the context of Mario Maker. How many doors you use, what challenges you overcome, the nature of those challenges, all that stuff. Like, fun, right? Very not specific, but highly detailed, or not specific to Mario, but highly detailed in its own way. So yeah, and when we're talking about gameplay ideas, we're talking about gameplay, right? And games have to be games, right? We're looking for interactive experiences where the player can make or interact, make some choices. Those choices have different valued outcomes, and if you go for the outcome that's considered to be a win, you're able to do so and negotiate using effort. So it's got to be somewhat skill-based instead of just luck-based. Those are the kind of games we're talking about here. And if you're not playing a game, then it's not really a gameplay idea, just to put it simply, right? So even though it sounds like a pretty generic concept, if you have clear enough definitions, which, by the way, guys, what do we got here? Designoriented.net. Not lesson hub, but if you go to designoriented.net/wheel, we have transferred the super colorful friendly wheel over to our main domain. It's been a long time, it's been about time, but you can check out all the detailed definitions that we use and check out the color coding right here on this interactive web-based doodad. But yeah, so we're using specific definitions of game, we're using specific definitions of play, and we're using specific clear definitions of idea. You combine them all and it should narrow down the topic to something very easy to understand. So yeah, this idea of something being transferable, something that's able to be applied for this or that, right? This medium, that story, this situation, is a really interesting concept. And I think the very core of it comes from this idea of metaphor, right here. So let me pull up one of my favorite Robert Frost quote, metaphor. Yeah, let's get his grumpy looking face. There we go. Open a new tab. Robert Frost, everybody. Unless you are educated in metaphor, you are not safe to be let loose in the world. Quite a bold statement from a writer and author and literary dude. But this is kind of an interesting concept, right? Metaphors are comparisons between things, right? And the only reason that we can identify things as being things is because they are consistent, you know. Pencils act like pencils. If whether you move them around or push them off your desk or hand them to somebody else, they're still going to act like pencils. And we use this consistency of the world around us in order to set expectations and to learn things about the world that we expect to still be true. Now, because of that, the world has a lot of complexity at the same time. And when you look at things, you can start to understand that there's a lot of similarities between things. Like things can be made out of metal, things can be made out of other similar materials, things can be straight, curved, wet, dry, flavorful. We have all kinds of words and all kinds of categories for describing just about anything that we encounter in life. And then some things we can put into groups, like you know, candy and lemonade and cakes and cookies and chocolate. They can all be considered sweet, and we have a word that describes something similar about all of them. You take that basic concept of things having complexity and then those complexities being shared among other things, and you start to get a really elementary idea of what it means to make a comparison, right? And you recognize groups, you recognize properties, and then you also recognize functions, right? Like this thing can scratch what other things can scratch this, you know, surface, right? It doesn't just have to be a property, but it can be how it's used or what it's good for. So when you realize that the world in all of its complexity can have countless of these details, and those details can make countless comparisons, you realize that the transferability of a gameplay idea is really just finding things about unrelated things, finding, you know, like aspects and properties of them that are the same, right? So whether we're looking at a movie with a time loop, we recognize, oh, time is a kind of a linear flow that goes forward. Some people found a way to break the time loop or are stuck in a time loop. They're going to go back in time and replay the same thing. It's going to be the same thing because it's a time loop, and time governs the actions, the timings, and the interactions of everything within its, you know, field of influence, and so on and so forth. That's why when you play a game with a time loop, it's a time loop. That's why when you watch a show with a time loop, you can still recognize it's a time loop. Those qualities are consistent. So yeah, that's just sort of a really basic way of understanding how complex the world is, for one, but two, how much more complex talking about the world is, and making statements and making comparisons. There's more comparisons between things in the universe than there are things in the universe. It's just a really simple concept to understand. So with that said, no matter what the medium is, no matter what the cause is, no matter what is going on, whether you're reading a poem or playing a video game, we're talking about metaphors. So let me just pull up another thing here, Critical Gaming, my old blog. And if you're super curious, you go to the blog, you zoom in, you click Design 101, you go down to the advanced section, and we're talking about story and communication, and I have an entire section about metaphors. Boop. Metaphor meaning matriculation. And one of my favorite commercials here, the What is Flight, Dwayne Wade. We're just going to go ahead and watch it and hope YouTube doesn't flag this. We'll just like mute it or something. Ooh, it's so tiny on my website. Ooh. It's Dwayne Wade, and he gets the ball passed to, and he's like finding somebody, and somebody steals the ball with the bad pass he did, and he chases him down, and then he does this. Falls down a ramp, powers up the ramp, builds strength, and then leaps. Stop the score from happening. Like, yeah, this is flight. Such an easy, simple visual metaphor to understand and relate to the idea of catching up to something, gathering your energy, you know, pushing hard towards the end, having to push harder at the end than at the beginning, right? So like that last climb he did up the ramp was, he had to put everything into it. And then the fact that when you use ramps in real life, whether it's in like motorsports or skateboarding or whatever, you know, you fly off of it, right? But this, it's making a comparison to say his ability to leap off the ground is as if he flew off of a ramp in some kind of vehicle, right? Which is a really cool comparison to make. It's a really interesting way to draw a comparison between those two types of things, right? And then have the similar aspects of them help you shed new light or define new things about Dwayne Wade and his ability to block shots. So yeah, this whole series talks about metaphor. It talks about what kind of metaphors are in game design. Hey, it's Mario. Hey, Mario. What you doing? We had these scratch cards. We bought these in Canada. When Marcus and I were kids, our parents took us to Canada, and the one gift thingy that I could get from the store in the mall, I got these Mario Brothers scratch cards, right? And it was like a whole box of them. So we had tons of these things, and I love these things. Oh, it's crazy. Okay, so yeah, talks about metaphor. Kind of walks through the whole process, applies it to what metaphors are in games. Like, we looked at the marriage, we looked at Digidrive, Box Live, Passage, Journey, I Wish You Were the Moon, Today I Die, Braid, Bioshock, Street Fighter, right? That's a lot of crazy examples. But games do it all the time. Games do it with just their controls alone. They do it with just their visuals. They can do it with their interactive rules and design. Like, games are complex. Hey, this is a Robert Frost quote. Haha. There we go. So, on a very basic level, you can compare just about anything, and I think that makes the world more interesting, more rich. And all the people who roll their eyes at puns, you know, I'm going to throw the gauntlet down. Those people are dumb, right? If the very base of your joke-making / lighthearted communication is a comparison between two things, that means it's a step above just pointing out a thing in the first place, right? So if you're just filled with puns and that makes up the basis of your jokes, you're already a step above just the normies, right? Finding puns and double entendres and portmanteaus out of things, and listening to words and their sounds and their meanings and finding connections, like that is an endless process when it comes to language and finding clever ways to communicate. So let me see. I kind of wanted to pull up Enlighten to show you a visual example of how the connections between things explode, but I don't need to show you that. Yeah, so it's funny. Double entendres are when the... I'm going to look at the definition. I don't need to make it up. Double entendre.
Double entendre.
Double? What is this double?
Double entendre.
Oh no, we've been saying it wrong.
Double entendre.
This is bad. Double entendre.
Double entendre.
I guess it's French.
I don't think that's right.
A word or phrase open to two interpretations, one of which is usually risque or indecent. He was unable to get through 2 consecutive sentences without a smutty double entendre. That's not even... They used it in a sentence, but then the sentence wasn't an example of a double entendre. That was disappointing. But yeah, let's just get a simple example from Wikipedia. From the French word double, no?
Marco double.
Where is... I need an example. Oh, so here's one. Double entendres are very common in the titles. Ratchet and Clank, up your arsenal kind of style. Lyrics of pop songs such as, if I said you had a beautiful body, would you hold it against me? That's a pretty good one. Yeah, so holding something against somebody is a phrase that we use to mean that you are taking fault with something that somebody says and you blame them for it. So it's kind of a negative thing that they hold over your head. But then the double entendre is physically holding the body against the person because the person gave them a compliment and we'll assume they liked it, so on and so forth, right? It's cool how there's two very distinct possibilities that you understand, but then you also know that this sentence doesn't point to anyone explicitly. You need more context or whatever to figure it out, and that's why these wordplay is such a broad category, but includes so many fun, interesting things. And it's interesting because you're making more connections between things, and making more connections between the complexity of this world is what people find interesting. Never forget that. So the people that roll their eyes, I don't know why. Triple entendre is a funny concept that we came up with because they don't exist. It's really interesting, right? Double entendres are all over the place. You'll say them on accident, right? Every time you use random words like stick or ball or milk, or like just random words like that. All those have their risque / grungy double entendre associations and meanings that can so often turn any normal sentence into a snickering, you know, it can send other people snickering when you say any common sentence about something completely ordinary, right? So double entendres just happen. The English language is filled with sounds that sound the same between like C's and K's, and words that sound the same like read and read. R-E-E-D, R-E-A-D, like we have fair and fair and fair, F-A-R-E, F-A-I-R, like all that, right? We have a lot of that, but then we also just have words that share meanings, right? Block could be a solid object that, you know, you can stub your toe on, or it can be the ability for someone to get in somebody's way, right? So with all these connections, words that mean other things and sound like things, you got such a rich environment for making connections, and that's just how language works, especially the English language, and it's a lot of fun to write in a language like this. So that kind of sets the stage for what we're looking for when we're talking about counterpoint or just level design in general. We can look for, you know, gameplay challenge. We already did a whole segment on challenge, but now we're looking for concepts. We're looking for ideas. We're looking for the thing that when you recognize, you go, oh, I get it. And like, it's a this. You know, like people do that all the time when they're playing these Mario Maker levels, because the levels often have ideas, whether it's a narrative thing, like, you know, keeping that Koopa alive, or that funny Yoshi narrative dissonance one, little narrative dissonance where you kill Yoshi, and like all these funny ways to convey ideas. So now let's get into counterpoint. Where's my definition? I read what counterpoint is before. This is just a Wikipedia definition: the relationship between voices that are harmonically interdependent but yet independent in rhythm and contour. It's been the most commonly identified in European classical tradition, strongly developed during the Renaissance and in much of the common practice period, especially Baroque. The term originates in the Latin punctus contra punctum, meaning point against point. Good old conjugation from us for the subject and for the, you know, predicate. Latin. So that's what counterpoint is. In order to get these really interesting relationships, sometimes people give themselves these strict rules to write musical compositions in. So sometimes the word counterpoint is often referred to meaning an exercise in developing one's skill. That's where you follow rigorous rules or whatever. But really, counterpoint is describing the relationship between multiple melodies happening at the same time and cool stuff that happens. Like this. Yeah, whatever that was. Okay. So let me go to critical gaming, metaphor, meaning, matriculation. Let's go to emergence. So linearity, emergence, convergence. It's a 9-part article series in which I talk about the nature of linearity, I talk about the nature of emergence, and I talk about their pros and cons, and I talk about, well, what is some kind of design structure that can take all the pros from both and none of the cons. And the conclusion of my article was that Mario does it. Long story short, all hope for level design is not lost. There is a type of level design that combines the pros of straightforward and open level design while taking none of the cons. This type of design isn't simply a balance between straightforward and open gameplay design found somewhere on the spectrum. So like this isn't just a matter of tuning things up or down, right? Like adding a little less of this or stricter corridors and more open whatever. Like that's not where you find the answer. The solution is a type of level design that truly represents the highest form of video game level design. It's powerful, it's flexible, and it's something that I've been talking about since the beginning of critical gaming. The convergence of straightforward and open level design is layered level design, and Super Mario Bros. Has been doing it since 1985. Layered level design is a general term that describes a particular way levels create density and variety of distinct gameplay challenges, or gameplay ideas basically. This density is only achievable by including optional challenges, otherwise the level design will be classified as linear or straightforward. One method of creating layered levels involves designing straightforward gameplay challenges that are stacked on top of each other so that the player can experience the layers simultaneously or organically by moving back and forth between them. Another way to do layered level design is creating a level that presents distinct challenges based on what the player brings to the challenge, like cooperative modes or power-ups or whatever. This can be achieved through various kinds of locks and sequence breaking, blah blah blah. So the core mandatory challenge of Super Mario Bros. Gameplay is maneuvering around environmental obstacles and enemies by jumping and engaging with gravity. We call this platforming. And while some environmental elements are destructible and several enemies feature back and forth interplay, let's take a peek. Yay! These charts I made such a long time ago. I love these charts. And I made them in such high resolution for no reason. Kicking a Koopa. Koopa turns on you. Red Koopas don't fall off platforms. You can hit them from below. When you kick the shell can come back. You can kick a shell into a shell. Like all these little chains of interactions. It gets down to level 3. And so believe it or not, the baller in Splatoon 2 gets up to level like 10 or 12, which is insane. 3 is already insane. 10 and 12 is just unheard of. But anyway. While some environmental elements are destructible and several enemies feature back and forth interplay, killing enemies and breaking bricks is mostly optional. Layered on top of this gameplay are optional challenges of coins and secrets. Let's focus on the layers of the environment, obstacles, and enemies. This is what we call the core of Mario. In the Mario Maker workshop, our courses tab, the beginning lessons are all the core, which is after you get your theme and what your basic idea is going for, you make your layout, you get your enemies and your coins, and you deal with your power-ups. Like this is the core Mario that we call core, because I call it the core. So this is just pure platforming challenges with no enemies. This is a challenge with pure enemies, and this is a challenge with pure coins, and how you might interact in these challenges if they were separated. Like the lines indicate different things you might do and different things you might think are interesting, or different ways that the level might influence you to move because of their particular interactive potential. Separate, these layers are straightforward and a bit dull. In each layer there isn't too much to do outside of the lines I've drawn. It's important to understand that because these layers are straightforward, that these strategies indicated by the lines are also very clear to, just about anybody. When the layers are stacked together, players will understand their basic options, which will significantly help them understand how these fit together and support emergent possibilities. So this understanding also builds more knowledge skills, which allows players to stress more of the entire spectrum, blah blah blah. So here's what it looks like when you put it all together, right? The green things that I circle are like the new gameplay experiences that you have because the other things are in close proximity. So this Goomba here becomes a booby trap of sorts because there's not a lot of space to maneuver. This multi-coin block becomes less about just waiting here with nothing to do, but overcoming this challenge, or getting a few and getting out of there, right? Like that's the thing. This is a new kind of thing to consider, a whole new distinct concept of not a booby trap, but it's like an animal pit or whatever, an animal cage, if you will. Like that's the concept that came out of the other things just being arranged in the same space. This little playground of sorts here is another one. The new lines are the brown. Oh, where are the new lines? The green, basically. But you get a new ability to platform on top because these bricks are here. Jumping away from these enemies, just like before when we showed here, means not that much. But under these bricks, it means you get to punch these coins from below. And when you punch these coins from below, you're more likely to punch more bricks because you think it's fun. You're more likely to discover this star because these enemies are here. Counterpoint, counterpoint, counterpoint. Not only so these new ideas popped up, but your ability to recognize a flow between what otherwise would be these independent lines increases when you design properly with counterpoint in mind. This is just a simple example from Mario, but it happens all the time. And blah, blah, blah. You can keep reading that whenever you feel like it. But that is an introduction to counterpoint. I went to critical gaming. I did the entendres. Mario Bros. 1-1. So the classic example that Miyamoto talks about all the time is counterpoint. We really don't need to go over it again, but it's just the fact that there's something scary coming and there's something blocking you on top, and then the power-up comes, and the way that you interact with it in the confined space creates these scenarios in which you both learn how the game works and oftentimes will stumble into those possibilities without help or whatever. So that's counterpoint. Miyamoto didn't have a word for it, but I do, so too bad.
You have some messages in your chat.
Okay, cool. Wow, so punny. South Park, fractured but whole. Yeah, good one. That one was funny. Don't cry over spilled milk. Is that the first floating coin right above the brick in the game? Is that the first floating coin right above a brick? I think so, because 1-1 is pretty... I mean, there is a coin above a brick in 1-1's bonus room, but you can't break it by being under the brick because you can't get underneath it. But yeah, I think that's true. Did the original level have a multi-coin block? Yeah, I think it was right after the pit where the Goombas are coming down at you and blah blah blah. Cool. That's Jeff in the chat. Okay, any questions, anyone, before we go into some examples?
I'm good.
Bleach is good. Okay. So, working with... Ouch. Working with Hayden, who is our community's little... our music go-to, he created the... Who's making noise? Boop.
Marcus, perhaps?
So Hayden made the theme song... Please, can you take care of that?
Take care of what?
I can't see Marcus's thing lighting up, so I don't think it's him.
Maybe it's your headphone center, the connection.
Maybe it's you.
Because I'm always on mute.
Let's see if I can hear it. Stay on mute. Defend your honor. I don't hear it. I don't hear it, Bleach. Anyway, Hayden did the music for the Mario Maker Workshop's intro song. You can hear that. It's made in Mario Paint, a Mario Paint version that was on a website that I found. So Hayden's a music guy, and he helped us out with this project. Called it Project Counterpoint. So I'm gonna play. Marcus, which should I play? Like the composite result first, and then the individual. No, wait. The original songs first, and then the composite result, and then them all together? Something like that?
Is the composite all together? What's the difference between all together and composite?
There's one where it stresses the composite, and there's one where it doesn't make it louder. So, like, one is perfectly blended, and two, it draws it out.
I don't think I like the separate to come not first. 'Cause you know what the songs are anyway.
Okay.
Because you need to hear it like first and have it overwhelm you.
Don't you? Okay. Okay.
They know what the songs are, so.
Okay, yeah, hold on. What am I doing? Marvelous things. Don't look. Don't look. I should just click this in. Oh yeah, you guys couldn't even see what was on the screen anyway. I'm hiding nothing. Okay, so check the composite, right, with the stressed thing? Or just the composite alone, isolated? Isolated?
Let's go with isolated.
Okay.
Let's go isolated.
Okay, okay guys, check it out. Listen to this. This is we're gonna build on this, so it's really important for you to hear it. And it's like 15 seconds. trying to figure out if I should put something on the screen while playing it. Maybe this.
Twinkle, seagull, have you any wool? How to wonder what you drink. You are master one for the stream. Like you, little boy who lives the dream. Now I row your sheep gently down the seas. How time wandered, life is with me.
It's 24 seconds.
That was very, I couldn't, that was choppy. What happened? I could barely hear it.
You could barely hear that through the stream?
Mm-hmm.
And you're listening through the stream?
Oh, whoops. Okay, my bad.
I heard it okay.
Okay.
Okay,
It's
okay.
really
I'm
surreal.
on the headphones.
Okay, cool,
Okay.
cool. Okay, so I'm going to play it again. I'm going to put the lyrics on the screen, and then I'm going to talk about the lyrics, and we're going to keep going. So... I wish these lyrics were larger. It's larger. Here we go. Boom. Boom. And time to... Oh! Shoot. No worries. I do this. I'll paste it in the Discord on their Mario Workshop. Boom. I will click this and say open original. Boom. We will go here, click back here, and we will play it again. New line. Here we go.
Twinkle, seagull, have you any wool? How to wonder what you drink. You are master one for the stream. Like you, little boy who lives the dream. Now I row your sheep gently down the seas. How time wandered, life is with me.
Alright, Bleach, you got that? You got that, Jeff? You got that, Zara?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that your sister, Nicole?
Yes, that's my sister. So check out these lyrics. This is kind of how I interpret them. Twinkle, seagull, have you any wool? Don't know what that means. But something's happening. How, sir, with a question mark. Wonder what you dream. So apparently, the situation opens up. Asks this animal for wool, and then the seagull's response is like, "How is that even possible, dude?" And then this question comes up. Wonder what you dream. So the next line is QR masked. The one for the stream. You're like, oh, they're queuing up the mast for a boat, and they're gonna pick the boat that's good for going down the stream. Like you, little boy, who lives a dream. You're like, oh, talking to some kid who has the dream life or some kind of good situation going. The speaker's just like, hey, I see you doing it. I'm gonna follow suit. And then now it says, now I row your sheep gently down the seas. How time won, sir, life is with me. Interesting. How time won, sir. Who's this sir? So this sounds like it's from the seagull again, but whose sheep is this? Now I...
Does this have an intentional meaning, or you find me?
Why would you ruin it, Bleach? Just kidding.
I don't know. I'm horrified and curious.
It's interesting. If the seagull, Twinkle Seagull, which maybe it's not actually a seagull, maybe that's just a name, like Seagull Joe, or Steven Seagal, or like that, something like that. But Twinkle Seagull, have you any wool? And he's like, how, sir? Wonder what you dream. And at the end, it's just like, now I row your sheep gently down the stream. Seas. He's like, where'd you get that wool from? And he's like, how time won, sir? Statements again from this seagull character. And then the main speaker's like, life is with me, so screw you. Living the dream, baby. Something like that, right? This is an interesting thing to consider. But the really interesting part about this project is as you may have guessed, Bleach, can you guess? Where these
Wait,
lyrics,
say that again?
where these lyrics come from and why they sound all weird?
It sounds like your sister was singing ABC. Maybe the spider on the water spout, whatever it is, and strategically split it up, but it still has harmony by them being a mishmash of different. Is that what you mean?
Correct. Let's take a look at the lyrics here. It's actually 4 songs in one. Let me play you what it sounds like, all 4 songs in one. This is what it sounds like normally.
Twinkle, twinkle, star, how I wonder what those are. On the western one so high, like a diamond lights the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, stars, how I wonder what those are.
Right? You hear that? Oh yeah, you're always behind.
I did. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so
I had to
that
put my thing back on.
that was 4 songs, all played simultaneously. Because it's 4 songs, they all have 4 different melodies. But in this interesting and weird case, the songs almost all have the same melody. It's just different words and stressed in different ways for the most part. So that's all 4 lyrics put together. However, just because of sheer randomness, right? Because this project is illustrating the power of counterpoint, and without picking songs based on their content or whatever, we just picked it based on the similar melody, so they'd fit together. The lyrics wise, through sheer randomness, we get this interesting, weird, surreal new lyric line, and this is what it sounds like when all 4 songs are played together and the new line is emphasized. Oop, no, this one.
Twinkle, twinkle, have you any wool? How I wonder what you dream. You are master one for the stream, like you, little boy who lives the stream. Now I know your sheep gently down the seas. How time wanders, life is with me.
Isn't that weird?
It's surreal to me how it
Almost did what? You cut off.
I said it's surreal to me how it almost sounds auto-tuned, like it's from a text generator.
Yeah, Hayden may have tuned them all to be in the same key or whatever, but they should be close enough. And now when you take a look at the lyrics, you can see what it looks like when they're all stacked up. Get out of here. Get out of here. How do I get rid of this thing? Well, anyway, you can say, ba ba black sheep, twinkle twinkle, A B C D, row 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 your boat, all the same kind of stuff, right? Have you any wool, little star, E F G, gently down the stream? Yes sir, how I wonder, H I J K, merrily 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 merrily, that kind of a thing. So when you look at the lyrics, when they're combined all together, you get what we were looking at before, this. So that was just a really interesting example, because the more you listen to the new song and the more you think about the lyrics, like if you hear, like I introduced it to you, the lyrics before you hear the composite, you're like, oh, this is just an interesting song, and it's got its own little thing going, and it's got its own story and consistent characters. And then when you hear it in the composite, you're able to pick it out better. I'll play the normal one again with all 4 songs going without any emphasis on the new line.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what those are. On the western one so high, like a diamond lights the sky. Twinkle, twinkle,
Man, I can hear all 5 songs. That's crazy. Ah! But yeah, just like we saw in the Mario example, counterpoint is powerful because it takes a bunch of relatively simple things and puts them in a context in which their proximity and their density creates new interconnections and possibilities. And you could sit there listening to that 4 stacked up song over and over, and you'll bounce between one song and the other, and you can understand all the lyrics because you know all the lyrics. But then the new song comes in, you can focus on it only, you can back out with your mind and explore other areas. It's kind of like a 3D song space. It's pretty intense. But that's just with basic nursery rhymes, right? Like nothing special there. We don't have to you don't have to be a crazy writer in order to come up with this stuff. It's just the structure of putting them together and hearing them simultaneously is what created that. Sure, this might be a little dense and a little crazy. Very few songs do this kind of thing like this, but they do it. And I got some more examples for you. So let's see what we got. Listen to this. All the fingers. Saying who rolled the stone away. I do not know, but I know he lives. All 3. So that happens all the time in gospel music. With our 3-part choir, we often break songs up into 3 parts anyway. Our harmonies are based on 3 parts anyway. So oftentimes in the I don't even know what to call that part of the song, there's 3 different lyrical lines going with 3 different melodies, right? And they introduce them independently so that everyone can follow along because it is a little intense. And then they mix it up. And then sometimes they even mix it up when they mix it up and put stresses on different syllables and words, and then kind of new sentences and new phrases and new ideas are created, and it's all done in real time, and it's crazy, and they can improv on it and vamp on it. It's pretty intense stuff. Go to church. I got more examples. Here's one from YouTube. Here's one from YouTube. This is a nice warm-up song I used to sing in the choir.
Marvelous.
Okay.
He has done marvelous. He has done marvelous things.
Pretty easy lyrics.
Praise the Lord. He has done marvelous. He has done marvelous things. Praise the Lord. He has done marvelous. He has done marvelous things. Praise the Lord.
So you hear how all the lines line up right at the end? Lined up.
Praise the Lord.
So that's one example of counterpointing I told you about, where you can have a bunch of separate things and one interesting thing to do is line them up.
Praise the Lord. He has done marvelous. He has done marvelous things. Praise the Lord. He marvelous, 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 marvelous things. Praise
Modulate.
the Lord.
Let's go. I always love the modulates. Here's another cool example. We got... I didn't type in enough sevens. This is one of my favorite songs from Games Period. There's 3 voices. There's 1. Yep, there's 2. There's 3. Hear that part right there? So that's an example of 3 voices with 2 of them lining up and the other one not wanting to join the party. You can hear it very clearly right here. And then the voice on top just like, that should be very obvious now that they lined up right there. So listening back to the beginning of the song, I want to say this composer is classically trained and just wanted to do something with counterpoint. Because how would you get this otherwise? Love that. So nice. I listen to that over and over and over and over and over. So good. So yeah, hopefully giving a clear idea of what it's like to how some works layer things up simultaneously and other works don't, right? Pop music doesn't layer things up typically like that at all. There's other kinds of ways to layer things up, like your classic round with a row your boat gently down the stream, row your boat gently, like just kind of go at the same time, you know, because I can't do it by myself. That kind of a thing. That's interesting as well. We got Bach Fugue, Katamari Fugue. Where's my Bach Fugue? Yeah. So, before we get into some gaming examples, it's really interesting how this relates to non-linearity and linearity, right? When we talked about how we learn, which we do often on this Discord channel, and when you think about Enlighten, you start off learning that game very linearly. You get one puzzle, and then you click it, and then you do another puzzle, and you click it, and there's really not a lot going on. But at some point, I guess I'll boot it up, if I can. At some point, there's so many branching possibilities, you can't even find all the branches, let alone kind of like remember to do them on a drops, like at any particular point, just do every single branch from that. It gets really intense. And it's really interesting because the branches you find are kind of reflective of your natural heuristics and your learning patterns. And when you see somebody else who does a branch you've never done before, you're like, why have I never clicked this? That's because you never clicked it, right? Like, you have your way of doing things, they have their way of doing things. It gets a little crazy. But when you get to the level and close to mastery, your understanding of the game stops becoming so linear. It stops becoming, I'll do this and this and this and solve it. And everything you think is like, I'm positioned here in the possibility space. I can go in any direction. I know exactly what I do to mess it up. I know exactly what to do to bring it closer to solving. Let's see what happens, kind of a thing. You're both seeing where you've been, where you can go, and other possibilities simultaneously. I think a lot of people, they ask me sometimes, like, oh, what's the best way to start doing this process? What's the best way to design a game? This first or this first? I'm like, do them all at the same time, right? If you can't, you know, you may not have that skill, or you may still be in training, that's fine. But essentially, when you have enough experience, you can see so much of the bigger picture that you're not in any step. You are aware of all the steps, and everything you do is constantly aware of all the steps and the pros and cons and the consequences, and steering clear of this and that. So that's a neat way to kind of describe nonlinear thinking, right? Not in steps and not in sequences, but in just all simultaneously realized possibilities. I feel like puns and metaphors and breaking apart language and diving into language like that, I feel like counterpoint in music, how you can listen to tracks and just bounce back and forth in so many different ways. Oh, check this out for like a literal metaphor of that. Marvelous things. Watch me play DJ Hero and get it flagged on YouTube again. I'll mute it, and I'm just gonna do this. So like DJ Hero is a game with 3 glowing tracks, right? Like kind of literal. And you can move a button on the right to keep to the music. You can move the button on the left. I don't even know how it plays. You got a scratch disc or something. Not even sure what's happening. I own the DJ Hero pad and I never played it. I also own the Guitar Hero game for DS. And I owned the Guitar Hero band set and the Guitar Hero guitars. Yay, Guitar Hero. But yeah, like, I think at some point in this DJ mode, or maybe, what? Do you guys remember that music rhythm game where it's like, you're switching between lanes like this, but it was more techno beat?
Audio Surf?
Audio Surf, okay. Is
yes. This bag of memories is paying off.
This is another interesting sort of literal interpretation of, well, if you got a song and 3 things are happening simultaneously, like 3 different, you know, tracks, it's like the middle represents what, the bass or whatever, the left the guitar, and the right something else, vocals, then like you can bounce back and forth between the tracks however you like, right? Like you can mix and match some words and some beats over here, some riffs over here, like seemingly an infinite amount of interconnections between 3 very distinct tracks, right? That's a ton of potential. People think about video game spaces as these virtual worlds you explore, but I'm all about these more abstract possibility spaces, and that's why Enlighten is the way it is, and so on and so forth. Good old audio server. So yeah, let's take a look at Mario. He can't croon, bro. Let's take a look at the chat. You mean singing a song around? I think it's just called singing. I thought it was called singing in a round, not singing around. Time to Google. Yeah, it's just round, not a round. I learned correctly when I was in kindergarten. And we did that for the first time. Okay. So let's switch over to Mario and take a look at that level that we were playing last something or other. He's come. Marvelous things has done marvelous things. Okay, cool. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Run Busters. So this is a level that we covered extensively on the last stream. And before I get to you guys' levels, I want to explain what the counterpoint going on in this is. Okay, what do we got? What do we got? So like, okay, straightforward, really not much you can do. And now you got some choices, right? You can play with this dude, you can throw it in there, you could kick it left, you could, you know, double kick it, make it go fast. Marcus is still the only person to be able to do that. You get into this area here and it looks very, very simple. Not a lot going on, just a hill and whatever. But it's amazing. I designed all these things to have so many possibilities. And in Mario games, it's good to make it to where if it looks like you can do something, you can do it. That's why I stay away from heights that are 6 blocks high. I always try to make them 7, so you can clearly see, like, I can't do that one. But even here, you got this Koopa to play with, and then you can kick it down here, and you can kick it over here. And what's interesting, when I was watching a lot of new people play it, they would say out loud, like, I think I could kick that to the left and have it come back and hit the switch. And they would just say it like on their first or second time kind of experiencing this area. I'm like, man, it's because the design of this course encourages you to do things which focuses your mind and helps you see other possibilities. Like the fact that this ramps down, it hits and comes back. The fact that this whole shape here is so odd, right? And it has this abrupt wall that you kind of pay a little bit more attention to because of these spikes. So then you go over here and we got these double hills. Some things that Bleach thought of was having it run on the top and hit this. And some other people thought of some cool things where you kick the Koopa shell in there and time it out like this. Ah! This came back at me. I did not see that coming.
Wasn't you supposed to let the shell go to the left of the blue shell or the blue blocks and then run back immediately and hit the switch so that it will go over the blue and hit the on-off switch and you can be over the pit and down in there?
I mean, there's multiple ways to do it, and this is the one I can't do. This is the one I just can't do. So I killed it. Yeah, so this is testing internal timing, which is funny because, you know, that was the task. Internal timing out of all the timings. I don't think it's going fast enough. But yeah, then there were some coins here before, but when you get the star, you can do stuff like this. And then when you're stuck down here, you know, you can run, slide jump, and get up there with your star power, which is kind of neat. You cannot make that jump. You can't stack turtles. You might be able to do something like this. But then, like, you can't get up there, right? So then this is something